Hey everybody, it's Charlie from Daily Motor, and I am here with Eric from BMW and the BMW iX5 Hydrogen. So this is a pilot vehicle from BMW, and it's essentially it's a little bit more than a prototype, but it's not quite a customer purchasable vehicle, but it's their first baby step into making customer saleable hydrogen vehicles here on the roads in America, but very much so over in Europe as well. So we're gonna get the opportunity to do a little bit of a drive kind of through the city here of Greenburgh in South Carolina and talk about the car a little bit, talk about why BMW is pushing hydrogen in a way that not many other auto manufacturers are yet, why they think it's the right move, and sort of what it's like to drive a very standard type of previous generation X5 that just happens to be powered by both hydrogen and a 2.5 kilowatt hour battery in the back. So a little bit of overview. Right up front here, we've got a hydrogen fuel cell. So you fill the car up with hydrogen. It's got 6 kilograms of capacity between two different tanks that sit in the middle of the car. And then you can fill those up with 700 bar hydrogen, and it will essentially take that and give you up to 120 kilowatts of maximum power out of this hydrogen fuel cell right here. Now, interestingly enough, the fuel cell is actually, it uses components from Toyota. So if you're familiar with the Toyota Mirai, the same internal actual hydrogen componentry right there, they're the same. They're actually buying them from Toyota, but BMW has differences in the actual electric motors and powertrain that they take from some of their other electrified products like the XM, like the X5 45e. So while some of the technology is similar to what you're seeing in other hydrogen vehicles, BMW has the most powerful hydrogen fuel cell on the market right now, even though it's not technically on the market. And as you can see here, and I know we're just kind of abandoning Eric in the back there, but he's gonna fill in if I say anything wrong. This is packaged just like a normal X5, and that's what's kind of cool compared to something like the Toyota Mirai, where you have a lot of packaging constraints. This has just as much seat room back here as a normal X5. You're seeing no changes in the floorboard there. And if we come back in the trunk area, the cargo, even though we have a 2.5 kilowatt hour battery pack under here and the electric drive motor, no sacrifice in trunk area. So you could actually go out and use this just as you would a gasoline hybrid X5, and you're not going to have any compromises in that way of some sort of packaging, if you will. Did I miss anything?
No, I mean, that's really it. The weight is going to be the same as an X5 hybrid, plug-in hybrid. It's going to be way less than if this were pure battery electric vehicle.
Yep.
Your rear trunk space is exactly the same as the X5 plug-in hybrid. You do lose just the tiniest bit of foot room from what would be the transmission tunnel.
Okay.
That's where we're storing the hydrogen tank.
Makes sense.
But having had people sitting in the backs of these cars, they haven't noticed it until I told them.
I wouldn't have noticed it. Yeah. That's really cool. Great, well, let's go for a little drive. Getting in, you do see a few blue elements, but other than that, this is a pretty standard X5 interior. A lot of black bits, kind of making it look sleek, futuristic. But firing it up, it feels very similar to driving an X5 45e in that there's no engine that roars to life or anything like that. No B58 magic here, but simply a battery and a hydrogen fuel cell. And right up in front of us, you see a percentage meter over on the left. That's essentially your fuel gauge, if you will. We've got about 99 miles remaining of hydrogen propulsion. And then you see similar information on the right of efficiency. Now, I can't really compare to you how efficient in kilograms of hydrogen per 100 kilometers that 2.1 figure is compared to any other sort of hydrogen vehicle on the market, because there really aren't very many. And we have driven the Toyota Mirai, but this one's got a lot of German going on, so we've got kilometers and everything. So we're not going to get into the weeds on efficiency, but we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to drive and then why BMW thinks this is the future. And I have to agree with them. I do like the idea of a mixed fuel future for a lot of different reasons. Coming away, this feels much like an electric vehicle, and that's because in a lot of ways it is. We are being propelled by an electric motor. It just happens to be creating electricity with that hydrogen reaction in there in the fuel cell. So we have two things going on. It's technically a hybrid vehicle. We've got the electric motor that can be powered by the battery, and then the electric motor that can be powered by the hydrogen fuel cell. And when you combine them together, I don't remember, you might know the exact figure, but something like 495 kilowatts? Is that a little high?
Ooh, I think that's a little bit high.
Maybe that's the horsepower conversion or something like that, about 495.
It's about
401 horsepower, yep. 295 kilowatts is what you're getting when both the battery and the hydrogen fuel cell are working together to propel this vehicle. So, I mean, it doesn't matter how you cut it, 400 is going to feel like a lot of power. Now, they're not giving us any sort of torque figures, but knowing electric motors, we can assume that it's a gutsy amount of torque.
That 0 to 60 time, about 6 seconds, but again, like you're saying, with any battery electric car or hybrid car, that instant torque really does make it feel a whole lot faster.
Totally. One thing that makes the Hydrogen X5 unique among hydrogen vehicles is the fact that it can actually keep up that maximum power figure that the fuel cell is able to put out. That's what, 125 kilowatts or something like that? Mm-hmm. It can keep that up at all times. So even if you were towing a trailer, going up the mountains, pedal to the floor, you'd be able to at least get that 125 kilowatts maintained, and it would essentially run this thing out of hydrogen probably pretty quickly, but it can do it, whereas a lot of hydrogen vehicles that we've seen so far can kind of give you a peak power output, but then it has to scale back quite a bit when it's just relying on the fuel cell. So you can barely tell, you don't hear it nearly as much as we heard in something like the Toyota Mirai, but this is doing hydrogen conversion in there. The fuel cell is running, and it's both working to power the vehicle as well as charge up the battery that's in here. And BMW can be strategic with how that power is used, because if you get off the accelerator right away, then it can still use some of that extra power and put it into the battery and make it so it's usable later on. So even though the fuel cell is working right now to convert, you hear a little bit of it running. It almost just kind of sounds like a light AC compressor running or something. It's a subtle noise. It's not nearly as noticeable as some of the less expensive hydrogen vehicles. And that is a little bit of an advantage that BMW has over brands like Hyundai or Honda or Toyota with their hydrogen vehicles, is because people have come to expect to pay more for a BMW product. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a premium brand. It's a luxury sort of car. BMW can put the money in to invest in these technologies and create a car like this. And yeah, admittedly, it will probably cost a good bit more than some of the competition when it finally comes to market. But again, people are used to paying more for a BMW than they are for a Toyota. So it's going to make a little bit more sense to maybe have a $15,000 premium on an X5 than it would to pay $55,000, $60,000 for a Toyota Mirai. And you're like, why am I paying that much for a Toyota sedan? Oh yeah, right there with just a little bit of right foot application, the vehicle takes off immediately. It feels very electric, very similar, although it's subtle, but we did hear a little whoosh of the hydrogen fuel cell in there. And again, because this is a hybrid vehicle, just like if it were a gasoline electric hybrid, you still get those advantages of when we slow down, the kinetic energy can be recuperated back into the battery, give us some of that potential energy in there. So yeah, you're not recuperating hydrogen necessarily, but much like in something like a standard hybrid non-plug-in sort of deal, you're at least getting some of that energy back. Very much feeling that kind of one pedal driving experience. We'll see if it brings us all the way to a stop coming up next time we stop. Foot off the accelerator, and yeah, brings me right to a stop here. Didn't have to apply the brake. Love that about electric vehicles. So BMW essentially knows that hydrogen is a future, and that might not be quite as apparent to some of us here in the United States, but over in the EU, there is market investment from the European Union to mandate the building of hydrogen fueling stations in towns with over 100,000 population, as well as along major highways. So we are going to see a little bit of that focus toward commercial vehicles first, things like trucks and buses, where it makes a lot of sense to be able to have a quickly refuelable product like hydrogen. But that's going to trickle down to and be available to customer vehicles. So some people might be thinking, oh, well, isn't it kind of risky to be building a fuel system here that doesn't have any sort of infrastructure? I heard it's really hard to get hydrogen fuel here in the States. Well, yeah, right here now in 2023 in America, it is. But BMW knows that they can scale up at about the same rate that the EU is scaling up, and supporting this hydrogen infrastructure, and they want to be one of the first ones to have a product on market that's compelling and useful in the real world. So they're doing their homework and their research now in products like this X5. Now, some of you may ask, didn't BMW have some sort of hydrogen product in the past that they were working on? Wasn't it hydrogen combustion? And yes, they did. For a little while there, they were exploring the option of using hydrogen as an internal combustion fuel. But there are two main problems, well, really a multitude, but a few to hit on right off the bat for internal combustion, whether it's from gasoline, diesel fuel, or in this case, hydrogen. The concept of an internal combustion motor, it's not very efficient. You're putting off so much heat, regardless of what you're burning. If you're creating explosions in order to propel an object, which is what's going on in an internal combustion motor, there's a lot of energy being lost to heat. And the beauty of using an electric motor for propulsion is it's a much more energy efficient means of propelling a vehicle. So yes, theoretically speaking, you can use hydrogen as a means of combustion, but we shouldn't be trying to find ways to do combustion engines at all. The main advantage we had with gasoline is that it was such an energy dense fuel that, yeah, 100 years ago we could get away with doing these internal combustion motors and it made sense. But hydrogen's not nearly as energy dense, even when you have it compressed up to 700 bar. So it makes much more sense to use it as a method of creating electricity rather than simply burning it and then turning that into kinetic energy that way. We're seeing it right now with Toyota in the fact that they stayed a little bit more conservative on a full battery electric future than a lot of other automakers did. And we've seen that kind of with BMW too. BMW is one of the other few brands that didn't say, yep, we're going to be full electric right away as soon as possible and everyone's going to switch over. They stuck to a little bit more, I don't quite want to use the word conservative, but more of a realistic viewpoint of, hey, a mixed fuel future makes the most sense. We see that even right now with the fact that, yes, most people use gasoline, especially here in America, but for certain applications, diesel fuel makes more sense. For other applications, what else have we used out there? Propane, natural gas. I mean, there's been a lot of different ways to motivate vehicles throughout the last 100 years. And now we're seeing battery electric vehicles come onto the scene, but that doesn't mean that it's the right perfect answer for everybody. Now, ultimately, there's a goal by both a lot of companies and a lot of people to move away from fuels that pollute the environment. And regardless of your stance on global warming or pollution or whatever like that, there are a lot of advantages and appeals to having a vehicle that doesn't stink, that doesn't smell, that doesn't create smog, and that can push us toward a more environmentally friendly future. And that doesn't mean all electric, that doesn't mean no gas ever, that doesn't mean no diesel, but being able to have a mixture of the right fuel for the right sort of purpose makes a lot of sense. For Alyssa, she's probably always going to be happy driving a full electric vehicle. Her commute is all of 10 miles, and whenever we drive pretty far, we're blessed to have the press cars, or we could rent something, or we've got my truck, or whatever reason, we've got a second vehicle in the household. But it would be cool for her to be able to have a full battery electric vehicle and never have to go to a fueling station ever, and then for me to be able to have something that has hydrogen and us use that vehicle on road trips, and I don't have to worry about keeping it plugged in at home all the time necessarily. And if you're somebody who is doing a lot of long haul trucking, diesel will probably still be around for a long time because it makes sense in other applications. So we don't need to be fully committed to one fuel or another. We can have them all exist in the world, and I think BMW sees that. I think we see that from a few other brands as well. And this car is just another perfect example of that. I am a bit surprised that BMW is not considering having a plug-in hybrid version of this car. And I talked with them a little bit earlier on about if that's been considered at all, and they said no, not really, because you can either just have a battery electric vehicle or you can have one of these hydrogen vehicles. But the reason I would like to see the idea of a plug-in hybrid hydrogen car be explored a little bit more is they went through and talked about all the benefits of having a battery electric vehicle. You can charge it off the grid, you could use solar, something like that, no pollution, never have to go to a gas station, which we know has been big for my wife Alyssa. And then there's a lot of the advantages to the hydrogen vehicle. You can refuel it quickly, you can also get hydrogen from natural sources and renewable sources, and there's no harmful effects to the environment. But some people still don't like going to fuel up, and they like being able to have that advantage of charging right there at your house. And all hydrogen vehicles are going to be hybrids anyway. So if we already have a 2.5 kilowatt hour battery pack on here, why not take the battery pack out of the 45E or the iX that's about 10 kilowatt hours or so, and give us the wall plug and make it so if I'm driving 5-10 miles to work and back every day, I could do that without ever going and getting hydrogen ever. And I could just do that solely off of my house's electricity. But then when I do want to go take a road trip, I have the fallback ability of that hydrogen fuel in there, so I can take off and I can go about not having to take so long to fuel up. So I would like to see that explored a little bit, especially because we know that if you have solar panels at home, you can directly take that energy that your house is making and put it right into your vehicle. It'd be cool to be able to do that and still have the advantages of a hydrogen powertrain. So there's full power. And I mean, yeah, it really gets you up and goes. It's going to be plenty of power for realistically what most people are doing in an X5. I mean, if you've got 6 seconds 0 to 60, that's about as fast as any soccer mom driving an X5 is going to be using it for. And yeah, that's pretty good. It is one of the downsides of using hydrogen as a propulsion method is you can't get that much power out of a hydrogen fuel cell right now. BMW has the most powerful one on the market right now, and it's still only making about 190 horsepower. So for a smaller kind of commuter car vehicle or something like that, yeah, 190 is totally fine, but we're going to need a little bit more progression in technology before we can really get a fast, performance-y hydrogen vehicle. And again, that's where I think some of the advantages of having a plug-in hybrid would work out, because then you could have maybe 10 kilowatt hours and maybe even more as battery density continues to improve. You could have a really powerful setup like we kind of have here and be able to actually use that for 20-30 miles or so of spirited driving, as opposed to the situation here in this car where, yeah, we've got 400 horsepower, but you only have that for a few miles before the hydrogen fuel cell really has to kick into overdrive and try to charge you back up. Here in 2023, it's been about 10 years since we saw BMW come out with the i3 fully electric vehicle, and then the i8 as well that was a plug-in hybrid, the plug-in hybrid version of the i3. But there was a pilot program before with an electric Mini and an electric 1 Series that BMW had running around to learn about how people use their electric vehicles and sort of how they should move forward. And then, even though the i3 and the iX weren't super compelling products for a lot of people, they sort of fit a very specific niche. But then the next gen, we saw all of a sudden big jumps in electric. And now from BMW, we're seeing X5, X3, i4, i5, i7. I mean, these are really compelling class-leading electric vehicles now. So that's been about 10 years or so for that process to naturally evolve. Well, we're going to see the same thing with hydrogen for BMW, where this is the pilot program. Then before too long, we're probably going to see a saleable hydrogen vehicle that, yes, is going to be a little bit more limited in terms of where you can buy it, where you can fuel it, what you can do with it. Then that's going to lead to a few more products, and then give it 10 years, and all of a sudden we're going to have a lot of hydrogen options in their different spaces. You're going to be able to get something like a hydrogen X5 or a hydrogen 3 Series or a hydrogen 7 Series, and you're going to have those options. Do you want electric? Do you want hydrogen? They're still going to be doing gasoline for a while. So BMW understands they want to be a big player in all of these markets, and in order to do that, they've got to start somewhere. And I think it's cool that BMW is making a name for themselves here with this hydrogen product. And I can tell you, driving around the city here, it feels so much more normal, if you will, than something like the Toyota Mirai that we spent a week with. And I mean, this just feels like we're driving around in a very quiet X5. So I'm really excited to see what BMW continues to come out with and how they push the limits. And then of course we got to see the infrastructure come online, but I really think it's going to. I mean, the fact that even here in the US, you can put a bunch of solar panels out in Nevada and Utah, and then you can do the electrolysis right there and actually make hydrogen and then pump that through either existing natural gas lines or truck it with containers or something like that, and then bring it around to different parts of the country that can't make their electricity quite as easily. That's going to be good for us. It's going to be good for nations that are not quite as energy independent and can't necessarily rely on other countries around them or their own countries to make enough electricity for a full battery electric future. So hydrogen's going to make a lot of sense, and yeah, So thank you all so much for watching. Thanks to Eric for coming along and providing expertise as well on the subject. And we'll see you on the next one. I'm Charlie from Daily Motor, and as always, mixed fuel future on.